Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, and this week, it's a week of acronyms. It is PNE, and it is the FAB, as well as talking about Wednesday on a Friday. I am joined this week by our regular panellists, Tom Whittaker and John Poole. I don't know who John Poole is, but maybe he's here anyway. We've given George Poole a week off and we've brought his alter ego in, John Poole. So stay tuned for that. Let's see if he fares better than our regular panellist, George Poole. We're also going to be diving into what happened at this week's Fan Advisory Board meeting that myself and George attended. On behalf of our fan network, we're going to give you some feedback on the questions that were posed to our board and the issues that came out of that meeting. So listeners, stay tuned. Let's go. John Poole, how are you, sir?
Yeah, all good, thank you. I think John's my alias when I don't do my hair and I wear a cap instead.
Yeah, it very much is. We've got a few technical issues going on here. Here we are. We're all back. Sorry about that, George. What a great start to this week's podcast. I always set out with our recordings with very good intentions for this to be polished and professional. And I think those of our listeners who've been with us for a long time know full well that that's never going to happen. Tom, how are you, sir?
Evening, Natalie. Yes, very well, thank you. Good evening, John. I always knew that moustache was fake, and that's just confirmed.
It is true. We send him to Australia, and George Poole comes back a completely different person. Right, gentlemen, we have got quite a lot to cover this evening, so let's get our session up here. We are going to cover very briefly Wednesday's game on Friday, the Wednesday game last Friday, where the Clarets romped home to a 4-0 victory, surprising absolutely everybody. And I don't think many people at that ground at half-time fully expected the Clarets to come away with a 4-0 victory, because it was a pretty rank first half. So we'll cover that shortly. I then want to pass over to George, who's given, for those of you who do follow the Clarets Trust or are members of the Clarets Trust, has given a really great summary of what George and I went through when we attended the Fan Advisory Board meeting this week. And then we'll look ahead to PNE this weekend. A bit of a spicy FA Cup fixture away at Deepdale, just a couple of weeks after that incident with the league game. So we'll cover that as well. Let's start. I'm going to come to you, George, first. Let's look at Sheff Wednesday. A victory that I think it's fair to say none of us were expecting, particularly those who were at the ground watching by half-time.
It was fantastic, weren't it? It's one of them games where you walk off at the end and you have no negatives to find, even though 45 minutes earlier, everyone was sort of thinking, oh, that was a bit naff, weren't it? And we're doing all right to be ahead at the break. I thought, to give credit to them before we go and talk about a bit of a demolition, I thought Sheffield Wednesday came out the traps really well. They were one of the better sides I've seen at Turf Moor this season. They pressed us really well and they really got on top of us. And it didn't have the feel of a game where we were going to stamp our authority on it. So to go in at half-time 1-0 up was certainly a positive, but it was probably one of the few positives you could find. I thought Marcus Edwards was phenomenal throughout. So he was probably the one positive you had at half-time. But yeah, like you say, you didn't expect to be sitting there 45 minutes later with almost every positive that could come from that squad of 18 was out there on the pitch.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, another clean sheet. It's genuinely getting really ridiculous now. I'm just going to give a few stats now before it's come here. So obviously, the Clarets haven't actually conceded a goal since the 80th minute in a 2-1 win over Watford on the 21st of December. For those of you following along, I am taking this information from the BBC Sport article on this very subject. Since Burnley last conceded, in fact, 8 championship clubs have changed managers. Manchester United have conceded 18 Premier League goals. And the US, of course, has a new president, albeit we say that very loosely. The 4-1 win over Sheff Wednesday on Friday. It was the team's 12th consecutive clean sheet in the league and left them obviously third in the table. Now, Tom, in the entire history of the Football League since 1888, only one side has had a longer run of league games without conceding the top 4 tiers, and that's Manchester United, who went 14 in a row during the 2008 and 2009 season. I know we've kind of been asking them to take the handbrake off a little bit and go for it, but I'm kind of at this stage now where I really want them to beat that record.
When it gets this close, yeah, it would be a bit annoying if we were to concede against some, like, especially a team like Cardiff or Luton. You know, if we were to concede in those games, it would feel a little bit so close and yet so far. I think it's nice we're talking about this today because there's been times this season where we've kept a clean sheet and it's like a tedious 0-0, or we've been sort of playing to keep a clean sheet and not really to win the game. And then hearing about this clean sheet record, excuse me, at those kind of points just feels like it's a bit annoying. It's like, yeah, but what about the 3 points? You know, that's all you're thinking about really in those kind of times. So it's nice that we can enjoy it, you know, after a resounding victory and sticking 4 on the goal difference. It is an amazing record. It isn't going to count for a lot if we don't get promoted at the end of the season, but it's something that I think we'll probably appreciate it more a little bit when it's over, maybe even. It kind of feels routine, doesn't it, not conceding a goal against the likes of Portsmouth, Sheffield Wednesday, etc. But it is remarkable, as you say, the second best run ever in English football, and there's still the potential to turn into the first. So, yeah, as I say, to me, it's been a little bit of a distraction at times this season, but it's a nice time to talk about it, and everyone involved obviously deserves a massive amount of credit.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think one of the points that our Rich Steele talks about a lot in our group chats, and I think he very much pushes, that sounds like it, we don't want to hear it, but he's very clear on this. And I think he's right when he says this, in that because of some other disappointing elements to the Clarets performance this season, the fact that we aren't the ones driving the league and making people chase us, or that we are potentially going to have to stay in the playoffs this season and not automatic, maybe not now with Leeds' victory over Sheffield United, but this really impressive feat has been somewhat, I guess, gone under the radar a little bit. And one of the things that we talked about at the Fan Advisory Board meeting this week, we'll come on to this in a minute, by the way, because I think George has got quite a few points to talk about this, was the lack of atmosphere at Turf Moor and the struggles that a lot of home grounds across the country have got in trying to get that atmosphere. And I think this is probably one of the byproducts of that, in that pride over such an incredible defensive display that the Clarets have put on this season. And let's be clear, it's very different to the backs against the wall, absorb the pressure, defend with every inch of your lifestyle that we were famous for in the Dyche years. It's a slightly different kind of defensive ability, I think, under Scott Parker. But it's the reaction to that is very much more sit back and admire and reflect on that and be proud of it, rather than jump up and down and scream and shout about it at the stadium. So I think sometimes not as much gets talked about the defensive record because it's not in your face. Whereas Friday night, Tom, was in that second half, 4 goals, 4 different goal scorers, and a fantastic display. That is what gets the crowd going. Now, from your perspective, is there a frustration that we have had so many of the 0-0s this season and not been able to turn in the performances like the first half at Hull and the second half at Sheff Wednesday?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's not just necessarily the focus on the clean sheets as well. It's the style of football we play. It is boring. There's no two ways about it. I know we won 4-0. I mean, I have to hold my hands up now and say, actually, I was away for the weekend, so I didn't actually see the game. I watched the highlights at the time of that Burnley were putting 4 past Sheffield Wednesday. I was watching, ironically, a 0-0 draw in the Dutch second division. So don't think I wasn't wishing I'd been at the Turf at that point. But yeah, by and large, I mean, I've been to the majority. I think I've only missed 5 or 6 games this season, and a lot of them have been really boring, and I've not enjoyed them, and I've not really enjoyed going. And if you're feeling like that while you're watching it, then you're not going to be inclined to create an atmosphere, I wouldn't have said. So, yeah, it's a dilemma, and it's a really difficult one. You know, if you're someone from the outside looking in and you're looking at we're breaking records, we're third in the league, we've only lost 2 games all season, you're looking at anyone complaining about that and thinking, you know, what more do you want? How churlish can you be? But I think when you're paying a lot of money, and that's another one of the problems of the atmosphere at the Turf at the minute, is the amount of money that people are having to pay to fork out, and it's not everyone can afford that, and maybe the people who can afford it aren't the same kind of people who start chants and drink 6 pints of lager before they go through the turnstiles or whatever. But if you're paying a lot of money to watch the game, and you're bored, I think that's a completely valid way to feel. And there's been games that we've won this season where Swansea, last minute penalty, streaky penalty, and I just come off that game feeling utterly hollow. It was like I didn't get any enjoyment out of that whatsoever. And there has to be a balance with that, doesn't there? I think. If we go up at the end of the season, I won't be complaining. But if we draw 0-0 and we don't show any ambition like we haven't done in a lot of these games, then you just think, what is the point? What are we even doing here? So without wishing to be too negative about it, because as I say, at the end of the season, if we've gone up, then it'll all be forgotten, and it's all fantastic. And like I said, they do deserve a lot of plaudits for what they're doing, and most people outside of the club would think there wasn't anything to complain about. But I think anyone who's watched us this season who thinks that the kind of football we play is conducive to creating a great atmosphere where people are up on their feet and enjoying fast, flowing, attacking football is kidding themselves, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like I said, we'll come on to this when we discuss a few FAB issues shortly, but that's certainly feelings that George and I have made ourselves very clear about this week. George, Leeds victory over Sheffield United on Monday night, Monday night, and our victory on Friday night has basically, Leeds are going to win the title now, undeservedly so. They're going to go away now and break away, probably, barring a couple of really flaky results from them. And it feels like it's a straight shootout now between us and Sheffield United for that second place. Interestingly, both Burnley and Sheffield United now have automatic promotion in their own hands. If either one of those clubs wins all of their games between now and the end of the season, they're guaranteed to go up automatic because, of course, there's this massive game at Turf Moor coming up between the two sides. Do you feel, George, that with the introduction of Edwards and a slightly more relaxed feel to the games and some goals being scored, do you feel like the Clarets are now heading towards a sprint finish? Has the table turned, and has this changed your view of whether we'll get automatic?
You always have peaks and troughs during a season, don't you? And I think our trough was very much around that sort of Christmas time. There was a lot of 0-0s. It was
that was a bad time.
It was a bad period. It felt like it was even more frustrating, I guess, because it came at that point of the season where you think we should be almost clicking into gear, and we didn't. And it was at that point that you felt maybe that the top two would be a push. Whereas I do think in the last 2 months since, let's say, the turn of the new year, I do think we've definitely had a different sort of swagger and style about us. Okay, there has been games in there where, Preston away where we go and draw 0-0. So there has been those moments, but I also do think there's been enough to show that we are a somewhat different side to the one, say, who was playing in November, where there are periods of play where, okay, it takes a while for us to get there, but once we're in and around the box, we do look dangerous. And I think on Sheffield Wednesday, you certainly saw that in the second half. I mean, we took them to the cleaners, and we weren't even the better side for 60 minutes of the game. I think the introduction of Marcus Edwards has been critical to this. We all sort of probably rightly bemoan the lack of a striker signing in January, but if you can get goals from somewhere, it's a positive, isn't it? And we've brought in goals in Edwards, who looks, let's be honest, a class above the Championship.
I don't know how we to be honest.
And from that, it's not even secret. From that behind the scenes thing that was Burnley put out, it was apparent that he had offers from the Premier League, but opted to go for a feel good, positive story in the Championship rather than slugging it in the bottom end of the Premier League. So we've got a Premier League caliber player there, and he's showing it against Sheffield Wednesday. He really showed it. That touch he made in the first half where the ball pinged out to him and he brought it down using sort of like a half scorpion and it knocked beyond him. He carried on down the line. I mean, stuff like that you don't see at Burnley. You don't see it at many Championship clubs at all. And if you go to the opposite side of the game, the fourth goal, you've got a fit and let's hope firing Manuel Benson back into the mix, who I feel like he's been brought back really smartly by Scott Parker. He's sort of he's dabbled every so often, but now when he's coming on, he's looking like a handful and he's looking like he's fit again. And that goal, that fourth goal was absolutely fantastic. With his weaker foot, the way it sort of seemed to sort of gather speed as it went towards the goal, and it just carried on going upwards. But it managed to find the net, and if you can get him playing well, coming off the bench, and you've got Edwards doing the business from the start of games, I think there's enough goals there to prove a sort of cutting edge. And with the defence on the other side, I think we can keep Sheffield United at bay. So yeah, I'm optimistic of getting that top two, but I do think it'd be really, really close.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tom, speaking of Benson's goal, and obviously I think the universe shook a little bit when Benson scored. I think everybody in that club was delighted. It was quite interesting, really, because when he got the ball and you saw him start to make that movement where he opened his body, and you're in your head, you're going, oh, he's going to open his body, he's going to shoot. Oh, he's on the wrong foot. Oh, never mind. It's in the back of the net. It's like, it was so weird. It was like I was watching it on the reverse camera mode on my phone. It was like, do you know, sometimes people put reels on and they crib footage, and it's reversed because, you know, they've done it the wrong. It was kind of like that. That said, 4 goals, 4 spectacular goals. It's quite difficult for me to choose who was my favourite. I think they all had, like, Edwards' goal was just a sublime piece of football. I thought Brownhill's goal was a really, really great piece of skill and a really cheeky thing. Roberts was probably the least impressive in front of goal, but the ball that Anthony put in to pass it was absolutely incredible. And then, of course, you've got the whole nostalgia and feel good of Benson scoring. Which was your favourite?
Yeah, the middle two aren't going to get my vote just because, like you said, it's slightly less spectacular. But Anthony deserves a lot of praise for the work he did there. I think the biggest frustration with Anthony is his end product. Sometimes he just rushes the cross or the shot, but he did really well to pick out those 2 players there. And again,
actually, I thought his end product was really good.
Nice to see people making runs, you know, running on. That's his first kind of third of the season. He did never got the right back popping up in the 6-yard box like that. So that was very encouraging. Thought Edwards' goal was brilliant. His feet are fantastic, aren't they? He's obviously not Lionel Messi caliber, but he's that kind of player, isn't he? It's just he's all through a wonderful left foot, and even though you know what he's going to come back inside because he's only got 1 foot, then the defender doesn't know what to do about it. And it's a really good finish, but it's got to be Benson's for me. I think it's the emotion of it. We know how long he's been out for. We know the fact that so many good moments from a couple of years ago were prefaced with a Emmanuel Benson rocket into the top corner. It's a goal that it's a type of a goal, I suppose, with him as well that really resonates amongst Burnley fans. And it was really good to see the reaction from the team as well. You know, the club put out that video of all the players on the bench just looking like in awe of the goal. Even Edwards looked quite impressed, which is no mean feat for Benson. And everyone celebrating in the corner with him, holding up his shirt, things like that. So he's obviously very popular in the dressing room. And as George said, he's a real asset to have back. Touch wood, he can stay fit, but he's a real asset to have back if he does for the running.
Good. George, any counter vote here for Edwards' goal if we're going to discount the middle 2? It feels very hard to discount the middle 2, but if we're going to stick with 1 and 4, do you have any claim that Edwards' goal was better than Benson's? Or not better, but your more favoured one?
No, you won't hear any complaints from me, but the Edwards one, the thing that really struck me was the way when he was at the edge of the box, the ball that he played in was so cheeky and so smart just to play his man in. Because it was with the outside of his boot as well, and just the way he threaded it through was a touch of class. And then to get inside the box, to show the strength to hold off his man, and then to get the way the ball managed to sort of get so high up on the goalkeeper that it made it really difficult to save. I think, yeah, just a sign of things to come from him. But no, the Benson goal, just you could see how much it meant to him, and I think their heart was bursting with sort of pride and adulation.
Okay, all right then. Well, that's 2 for Benson. I'll put a claim in there for Edwards, just to give him. It's not a complete hat trick for Benny, but I think everybody did very much love that goal. Let's park football for now then, just because I want to touch on, and I'm conscious of time, I do want to get some feedback from George about what happened at Turf Moor this week, just because we don't always manage to get information out to our fan base. We do try and collect as much information as we can, but we don't always manage to be able to get that information back to them. For those of you who haven't yet got yourselves fully up to date with this, Burnley do now have a full fan advisory board, which is a Premier League requirement, and which it was brought in because of the Super League breakout. Burnley don't need to have one when they're not in the Premier League, but they chose to implement it before they got promoted, and they've decided to keep it in there when they are not in the Premier League, just to because I think it's the right way to run it. None and Ever have got 3 members of our team on the fan advisory board: myself, George, and Charlotte. Charlotte wasn't here this week, but George and I were at that meeting. Those of you who follow our social media channels, we did post a link, an open thread to submit some questions. Do look out for the next meeting in April, I think, to submit those, and we submitted them on your behalf. So I'm going to hand over to George, because George, as you know, is the current chairman of the Clarets Trust, and he put together a really great summary just to give you some feedback on some of the items that we discussed. And George, the floor is yours for a while. We're going to chip in with a few things, but do you want to start by kicking us off with a few things that came up, please?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So just, for people who don't know, the fan advice board is circa 22 people, fans of Burnley Football Club, who were selected. There was a round of interviews. Anybody could apply to be part of this board. It was well publicised a couple of years ago. People who applied, there were interviews. The club decided on the makeup of that board, taking into account things such as, your diversity, background, making sure it was really representative of the Burnley community. So you've got both season ticket holders and non-season ticket holders. And in fact, at this last meeting, we got presented with a report from the Premier League on fan engagement, and there were things to work on for sure. But one of the things that they really praised Burnley for was the way the fan advice board represented quite a diverse range of opinion and supporters, which I think is something really to be happy with. And you see in these meetings viewpoints that you wouldn't even consider, because you're from a different background, you've got different experiences, you may be a different age, and it really does add a sort of a bit of vitality to these meetings. The meetings themselves, I'll just give you a little background of how they work. You've got an agenda, and let's say half the meeting is spent on presentations from Burnley Football Club to this group of people, saying here's our updates on what we've been doing on various little things. At the end of the meeting, you get a football update, which is more the side of things often you can't share, because it's just sometimes it's stuff that maybe it's about to happen on the transfer front, so you can't share. But for the majority of the meeting, it's stuff that's fine to be shared. Maybe you're getting heads up on new stuff going into the ticket office, blah blah blah. And then half the meeting is spent usually on sort of discussion points. So whether it be in the past sort of Q&As that have been submitted to the board through, Natalie did her sort of call to arms on social media. I did the same with Clarets Trust, and you submit those. Now, this meeting this week, there was 2 big discussion points, neither of which really too much came from the questions submitted. They'll be answered in a written form in the minutes, which is a bit frustrating, but honestly, believe me, these meetings run long, and sometimes you can't fit everything in. So there was 2 big discussion points. One was, what can we do about the atmosphere? This was something that came forward, from the club, but from the supporter representative chair on the FAB, Paul, who really felt this was something to be discussed, and I think he was right to discuss it. The other big discussion point was Burnley FC in the community, their sort of action plan for the next 3 years. So those 2 topics were sort of discussed amongst these 20 odd members, ideas thrown about, blah, blah, blah. And then the other half was sort of was updates. I guess rather than just like me talk, the atmosphere point, something obviously wasn't resolved, but you had your big sort of key talking points of goal music, pre-match anthem, what the club can do to really encourage an atmosphere, whether it's even, too much of an issue in the first place. Because from where I'm coming from, I think we've got to be wary here of taking things in context. There's this golden era of Sean Dyche's Burnley in the Premier League, where your back's against the wall, you're the underdog, you're fighting against the best in the world, you're playing football that's back to front, so it encourages real raucous support getting behind. It's fast flowing. And then you've got now, you're expected to win every week because we're playing teams like, you know, who are significantly weaker than us. You're playing football that's arguably boring, and you're drawing a lot of games. Like, is that really going to encourage atmosphere? Is there really a big issue here? No. So I think you've got to be wary of being too critical of like the home support, but it's not to say there can't be things to be changed. So I guess I'll throw the floor open here for us to sort of have that mini discussion on atmosphere. Is it an issue? Is it something that needs to change? And do we have to be careful it isn't too top down?
Tom, let's bring you in on this. Questions. Is there an issue with atmosphere at Turf Moor, and what can we do about it?
I have got quite a lot of opinions on this. I mentioned that I've just been away for the weekend in Europe, so I went to a game, good spread actually. I went to a game in Holland, a game in Germany, and a game in Belgium. The game in Germany was Borussia Dortmund versus Union Berlin. 6-0 win for Dortmund. I was in the yellow wall, fantastic atmosphere in there, as you can imagine, and even the away end was absolutely rocking. Even though it was 6-0, no one laughed early, everyone's still cheering. And you look at that and think there's a lot to aspire to there. But and I feel for the club, because I think the club, or the people who run the club, don't do the same thing. I think they look at atmospheres elsewhere. They look at atmospheres in Europe and think, why can't we have that at Burnley? You know, we've only lost 2 games all season. We're breaking clean sheet records, etc. Why aren't the fans clapping and cheering for 90 minutes? There's a few things really, and I think the majority of them really are outside of the club's control. It's just what English football has become in that regard. It's things like constantly moving kick-off times around. It's to suit Sky TV deals. It's things like not being able to have a drink in the grounds. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but most grounds, even in Europe, even where you can drink, it won't be like 4 sides all just drinking constantly and singing constantly, but you'll have a stand, which obviously at the Turf will be the cricket field, where there'll be people drinking there, constantly making an atmosphere. It will be all standing. Again, in Europe, you'll have one stand where it's sitting, one where it's all standing, but that's where the atmosphere is coming from. Again, the ultra stand behind the goal where everyone's standing. And these kind of things, the club haven't got the choice. They can't allow everyone to stand in one stand. They can't allow people to drink beer within view of the pitch because it's not legal in England. They can't control what time Sky TV put our games on. They can't control the fact that we hardly ever get a Saturday 3 o'clock home game. And I think these things would improve the atmosphere, and there's no blame attached to the club for the fact that those don't exist. Things where the club could do better, the flags thing, I noticed from your update, George, that's come up, and the club blamed, when they spoke about bringing flags in, it was like, oh yeah, some crap ones for 15 quid that you buy from the club shop. So basically what they're thinking there is we can make a few quid off the atmosphere. The flags are crap anyway that they sell, but the point of them is, you get creative, you make your own designs, don't you? And it's things that are important to the fans. And again, the owners, we're the best one in the world. They don't really know what's important to Burnley fans, I don't think. I know they've been here a few years now, but I very much doubt and even know who Glenn Little is, for example. This kind of thing. So if they're serious about creating an atmosphere, then there should be. I mean, and they're hiding behind this excuse of they have to have a fire certificate or whatever. Well, you should be able to submit your own, and bring them in, get the safety officers to have a look, and then issue a fire certificate if you think that's fair, or tell you what you need to do to break within regulations.
They are looking at that, yeah.
I'll have to, next time I see you, I'll have to show you some of my photos from Dortmund, but the amount of flags that are going in that yellow wall constantly for 90 minutes, sometimes you can't see the pitch, there's that many, but it's, it all helps, and it looks very impressive from the outside as well, and the other stands are seeing that and thinking, oh yeah, it's rocking in there. It bumps the atmosphere up in the stadium for sure. And then the other thing, we mentioned it earlier, is ticket prices. The tickets are too high, and I think the initiative they've got where they're bringing in the lower walk-on prices for March is very good, recognising it as an issue and doing what they can to address it. But ultimately, the people who own the club aren't here because they're Burnley fans. They're here because they want to make money out of it. There's a lot of American owners in English football, and it's because American owners think that English football is significantly undervaluing itself as a product. They think one of the ways that they can make more money out of English football is to charge everybody more, and they'll still sell the grounds out, etc. Now that may be true at the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, where they're always going to sell out every week. There's always going to be plenty of tourists queuing up to replace season ticket holders who can't afford to go anymore. It's not the case at Burnley. Even this year, probably the company year, we were selling out pretty much every home game. You can see that we're not this year. I mean, they're not horrendous attendances for what we are, 19, 20,000 or whatever. But if we have another season where we're playing this diabolical football, or if we have another season or 2 or 3 in the Championship and we stop being contenders because the parachute teams are replacing us at the top, we're going to go back to what we had in the probably the core season. Even we're probably still getting 13, 14,000 then, and that'll happen again. Especially if the ticket prices are as high as they are, and what are they going to do then to arrest it back? Because it's very difficult to slash your season ticket prices and still compete on a budget, isn't it? Especially when you've kind of you've lost that massive source of income from the Premier League. So that's something that they've got to be very, very careful about. And my sense is again that they don't really understand Burnley as a town, the kind of the affluency levels in Burnley. What putting those prices up to that level is going to potentially have as a long-term knock-on effect. I mean, we might go back up this season and then it's sold out every week and they can flog these tickets to tourists if Burnley fans can't go and everything's rosy. But that's always going to be an issue with the atmosphere, because if you fill it with tourists, you'll make more money. Or as we saw last year, with all the Everton fans in the home end and crowds kicking off, you'll make more money if you put away fans in the home end because you'll sell the seats. But they're not going to, clap and chant and cheer when Burnley scores. So that's another balance that you've got to strike between the financials and the atmosphere, and what would they prioritise? And my guess is they probably prioritise the financials. In regards to your point on the top-down thing, sorry, I can see you all itching to come in.
No, carry on, please.
It's never going to work in England because there's no culture of it again, and I don't think they understand that. Do some people think?
What are you talking about, Tom? What's not going to work in England?
Sorry, I'm talking about things like the club bringing in a drum or the club bringing in goal music, things like that.
Yeah, the unorganic, the stuff that's manufactured atmosphere.
Yeah,
not a fan.
It was interesting. So this weekend, not to keep banging on about it, we've been in Europe. I went with a friend of mine who's a.
Have you been in Europe this weekend, Tom? I don't know what's worse. You've been in Europe or George has been in Australia. It's like, all right. I've been in my house. Carry on.
It's relevant. I promise. So I was talking to my friend in Denmark about. So we were at a game in the Belgian second division on Sunday, and by the way, when people say the atmospheres are always brilliant in Europe, you should have been at this game. There's about 1,000 people there, maybe 25 ultras banging a drum and doing their best to chant along. And I said to my friend in Denmark, if that was in England, they'd say, what a tin pot outfit, 25 of them banging a drum and singing songs. And he said, weirdly, in Denmark, it's viewed as if you've got enough fans that bother to bring a drum and try and make some noise, that's less tin pot than just an away end turning up without a drum and not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a cultural thing there, and there's loads of drums in the Yellow Wall at Dortmund, but it works for them and it's part of their culture. But you can't just look at something that someone else is doing and go, yeah, let's do that, let's get a drum because it's working there for Dortmund or Patriot and Matt Necklin or whoever else in the Belgian second division. Because if you have a drum over here, then what's the immediate reaction? People saying we're Burnley, actually we don't need a drum. People say you can shove it where the sun don't shine, etc. Because it's seen as being plastic, And I don't think they really understand that all they're doing, if they bring in goal music, if they bring in blaring anthems that nobody knows the words to or that don't have any historic connection with the club, if they bring in drums, all that's going to happen is people aren't going to engage with it because nobody wants it, or the vast majority don't want it. And all it'll do is make other clubs look at us and go, they're tin pot, they can't generate an atmosphere by themselves. Now, I've gone through a lot of points there without giving you any answers as to how we can improve the atmosphere.
You could be a politician, by the way.
My only suggestions really would be make everything cheaper and play better football. And I don't think the board are going to do A, and the board don't really have any. Well, they kind of do have a bit of control over B, don't they? But not necessarily. If we get promoted next season and we do all right in the Premier League, the atmosphere will improve. If you bring the ticket prices down a bit, the beer prices down a bit, people will be a bit more inclined to go on. People will be a bit more inclined to have a drink, and then they'll be a bit more inclined to sing a little song. But beyond that, it's a problem in English football that's not unique to Burnley. It's not unique to most clubs in the EFL, and it's not going to get solved unless things change at the top. And those are the things like ticket prices. Those are the things like safe standing. Those are the things like being able to have a drink inside the ground. So yeah. I'm not going to worry about it too much really until those things happen. And I think fair play to the board. They obviously recognise. I think there is an issue there, but I don't think it's an issue unique to us. And I don't think there's a massive amount they can do to change it, really.
Yeah. I mean, George, if I may just jump in here a little bit, I think there were so many discussions that came out of this. And I do respectfully suggest that I think that the comments from us that the football that being played wasn't particularly conducive to exciting atmosphere kind of fell a little bit on, not deaf ears. That sounds unnecessarily harsh. I know Alan's very much of the view that the team have given us an incredible defensive display this season and one we should be proud of. So why isn't that generating an atmosphere to which, I said earlier on, that's something that's very much sit back and admire and reflect on rather than jump up and down at the stadium. So all of these things were discussed. And I do think the elephant in the room is the fact that, we've seen so many 0-0 draws this season, and we've seen backwards and sideways passing that, you can't, with the best one in the world, that's not going to generate an atmosphere. A couple of things that they are looking at, I think we've mentioned before, they are looking at possible ways that they can get pre-sign off on flags. So you keep your flag at the club and it's been checked from a safety perspective. You pick it up before the game and you're allowed to take that one in because it's got a stamp on it. You're all right. You can get that in through the door. They are looking at some catering bundles for family bundles to maybe bring some food bundles back in to make things a little bit more reasonable, particularly those with kids, or maybe some more children's offerings. So the only offerings at the moment for kids' food is a full price adult hot dog or a full price adult pie. You've got a 7 or 8 year old, they don't necessarily want to eat that. So maybe they're looking at that. And one of the main things that we talked about, which is going back to your point about organic music, they know the walk in on music has caused a problem. It's not quite landed. Several of us in the room were literally looking at them going, play Wild Rover, play None and Ever. Like, that is the obvious walkout one. I know Russell has got some concerns about whether or not that aligns with the club's vision to be forever forward. I'd say you can have both. I think you can still maintain some really strong heritage points and some real traditions of the club, but also move forward always with other areas. So I'm hoping that at the next home game, which I think is the Luton game, isn't it? They are going to give Wild Rover as a walk-on music a try, and let's see if that makes a difference. So a few good things there. I know Paul's view was that Paul Cade, who is the chair of the fan advisory board, from a fan perspective, I know he was very keen for us all to make sure that by the time we get to that Sheffield United game that Turf Moor is rocking. I think that's going to come anyway, because fan atmosphere at a game comes either from a sense of jeopardy, i.e. you're fighting relegation and you've got to win. It comes from entertaining football and goals, or it comes from an occasion. And I think a home tie against Sheffield United, potentially for automatic promotion, is going to generate that anyway. Conscious of time, we're about 38 minutes in. George, I'm going to hand back over to you, please. We've gone through, I think, most of the couple of those two things. So was there anything else on there that you want to raise back to the floor, please?
I think Tom's hit the nail on the head there with ticket prices, with food prices, with wider cultural issues, safe standing, the fact that everyone is struggling through the, cost of living crisis, which is still going on. And to be honest, Tom, I think the term deaf ears probably fits here. I've got noted down here a comment from the Wednesday's meeting about food prices. It's benchmarked to other stadiums. So which the obvious question was, well, does it take into account anything, to do with the economics of each particular town? Well, no, but it's benchmarked to other stadiums. Okay, so that's nonsense then, because obviously people in Burnley can't afford anywhere near, what people who are going on the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium can afford. So I'm afraid stuff like that, I fear, is falling on deaf ears. And whilst we've rightly praised the sort of March ticket price deals, if you actually go in and look at those prices, they're still not great, which was rightly pointed out by Jamie Smith, our friend Jamie of the None and Ever newsletter, on X or on Twitter. So I think with stuff like that, we're still going to struggle. Now, I do think some top-down things can help, like the anthem, which is still divisive. I noted that the response to it wasn't as positive as I thought it might be when I said Wild Rover's been heavily suggested by the FAB. A lot of people are rightly saying, A, it's too slow, like the actual song is too slow to sing to. And
B, that's true, actually. Yeah.
And B, obviously, them lot down the road play it, so it feels a bit like they got there first. So you're never going to please anyone. Maybe it's something that might help. What definitely will help, hopefully, is that safe standing over the next decade will expand. In the summer, the cricket field stands going from 1/3 of the capacity safe standing to 2/3. So I know they all stand up anyway, but it helps. It helps safety wise at least, and hopefully we can get people. I feel that sometimes the cricket field stand, they all conglomerate towards the away fans, and it looks empty half the time because they've all shoved over. Now, hopefully, with proper safe standing, hopefully, everyone will be in position, ready to sing. And there was ideas thrown from not from the FAB, because we would never even try and suggest it, but from the club itself of, well, maybe in the future for some games we can have that whole stand for away fans and put the away fans if there's less than 1,000 elsewhere. So I'm hoping something comes of that, because
that was a great idea, by the way. It was a great idea.
It would improve the atmosphere. So I do think there's stuff that the club can do to improve this, and I think it's fair enough that they're bringing it up, because there can't be too much harm, as long as a drum doesn't come in, which I do still think they're itching to do. But as long as we can keep,
Alan's desperate for a drum.
As long as we can keep pushing back on that, I do think some good things.
Let's give him one in the director's box and let him lead the charge.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just round out with some
please do.
Updates, but you can read this properly on the Clarets Trust social media. But I mentioned before the discussion around Burnley FC in the community. It was just sort of spitballing ideas of where their sort of aims can go in the next few years. So I'm not going to relay that, but I think we can be proud of some of the stuff they've done. So far, they're coming up to the 3rd annual Iftar event. They reported back that there's been really well attended sessions with local mosques, with particularly like young female footballers as well, which I think is fantastic, and it reflects the diversity of the town. There's going to be more champion of the STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths provisions that's coming through the sort of education in the local area. So things like that, I think, it's great to hear about, and it's nice to feed it back. Other than that, there was a few updates about the ticket office, which does seem to be getting better. Headline news, I guess, season tickets for next season. Everyone's going to get a card, but you'll also get a digital version, which I think for anybody who went to Preston the other week and is going to Preston on Saturday, digital's great. Like it is. Trust me, I'm one of them who hangs on to my physicals. I've got gig tickets going back, 2 decades, and it's a real shame to see it go. Having the option of both is a nice middle ground. Now, whether it'll be the case in 3 years, who knows? But for now, I like it. And the club are going to put on workshops for people who might not feel comfortable using digital tickets. And, they reported back stuff like there's new help desk on the ticket website. So if you're ever having trouble, just go and have a look at that help desk, because it does seem to be functioning quite well. I know it's been soft launched so far. So, yeah, updates like that are nice to go back. But, just read the full update if you want. And as ever, we always try and put out a little call to arms for questions, which the ones that were sent to Natalie last week are going to be answered. Everyone, that's the promise, in the written minutes, which usually come out within 3 weeks of the meeting. So keep your eyes peeled for that. The next meeting's scheduled for sort of late April. So again, there'll be a call to arms again. So yeah, I think, generally the FAB comes into criticism, and I think rightly so on some cases. It's been hard to feed back, and I think hopefully we're getting better at it. But hopefully the updates are helpful.
Thanks, George. Yeah, definitely. I think the shift in the first few months of the FAB, it was very much more of a demonstration forum for the club to be able to share with the members of the FAB what was happening in the background, and there was definitely a need for a transitional period where we learned as fans how the club operated. So some of those meetings were really needed, because we needed to know who everybody was, how a football club operates. We've never operated a football club, and that helps refine the purpose of the meetings and the agendas on the meetings and what we feel we can do as the FAB to help you as fans to connect those dots, essentially. The move towards an FAQ section where fans are able to submit questions has been really helpful. As that has grown in popularity, that has put pressure on the timings of the meeting, which is why this meeting, and some of this is my fault, I didn't get them to the club till quite late this time, but they will be answered in meetings in minutes. And I think what George and I have pledged to do is that where we can't discuss an agenda item that's an important one in the meeting because of time constraints, and it then gets dealt with in minutes that are published on the website, if that raises what we think is a significant theme that needs addressing, then we will put that on as a proper agenda item that needs to be discussed in the meeting. One of the most important ones, I think, is the brand identity. There's a lot of fans that have raised concerns about a move from claret to purple, the B sign, the messing with the badges, and obviously there's this feeling, particularly with the comments around making sure that things are forever forward. I think for those of us who sit on the fan advisory board, it's very important to keep our identity and our heritage while still making improvements that we need to keep us relevant in 2025. So watch this space, listeners. If anyone's got any questions, drop us a line at podcast@nonanever.net and we will do our best to answer you. Go on, George.
And also, I'm going to do my own shout out here because it plays in. If you ever want to contact the Clarets Trust, there is a contact us page on our Clarets Trust website that I spent 3 hours fixing last night. So thank you to our member who flagged it. And it took me 3 hours of going through the most mundane WordPress learning, but it works now. So I'm gonna publicize that, because please go and use it if you ever had any queries.
I mean, to be fair, it's taken me about 9 months to fix the Nona Never website, which has still got a maintenance page on it, but I haven't yet done it. So you're doing better than I am. Gentlemen, let's look ahead very quickly. Let's round off our action and our content this week by looking ahead to this weekend's fixtures. The FA Cup. Regular listeners know full well that I am a massive fan of the FA Cup. I still believe in the magic of the cup, and I want the Clarets to really go for it this season. And I think that we've got a squad and a manager and a capability to be able to maintain and push for promotion and a deep one in the FA Cup. I don't think we need to sacrifice either. We have got a real Lancashire spicy derby, which is Preston away from home. And Tom, I'm going to come across to you first, because this fixture and this cup tie has been made significantly more spicy by the incident with Hannibal. And is it Osmatic? Is that how you pronounce it? Come on, George. You usually correct me with play names.
Osmatic.
Osmatic. Thank you so much.
I think George pronounced it even worse than you last time he was on. So
did it? Right, I'm not going to give it to George then. Osmatic. Thank you so much. Tom, very spicy now, with Scott Parker admitting this week in the build-up to the game in his press that he hasn't yet made a decision whether Hannibal will feature. We fully expect that Preston boss will play his player when, pressed on this in his post-match, pre-match interview. He very much shrugged his shoulders and went, "Why would I not?" What's your view, before we get to the actual nitty-gritty of the game, what's your view on whether Hannibal should play or not?
I'd leave it to him if I was Scott Parker. I know that he's got a hot streak. I know there was a lot of worry after the incident happened. I think there was a worry that he was going to retaliate, get himself sent off. But I think he conducted himself really well, and he has conducted himself really well throughout the whole process. He didn't react, he didn't respond. He went to the referee and followed the correct protocols, and so did the referee. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. I think we've seen a more mature. I think he's not been sort of flying around getting himself silly yellow cards as much since the Stoke incident. And I think if I was Parker, I'd say, look, that Osmatic is obviously going to be playing for them. How do you feel about it? Do you feel in the right frame of mind to play? I suspect with the character that Hannibal is, he'll very much want to play, and he'll very much want to have a big impact on the game. And if that's what he wants to do, then I would go with his wishes. Even
if that means tempers obviously spilling over. He gets a red card and he misses league games. Is that a sacrifice worth taking?
Well, that's up to him, isn't it? Like I say, I think he's a grown man, you've got to give him that kind of responsibility. As I say, I think his behaviour's improved a lot since the Stoke game when he made a foolish mistake. If he does it again, obviously there's kind of mitigation there, but he's not some kind of unpredictable child that we need to kind of mollycoddle or we need to make allowances for. If he does do something stupid and gets himself sent off, well, fine him, dock his wages, whatever. And if he's honest with himself and he doesn't feel that he can handle himself, and there may be very good reasons why not. I'm fortunate that I've never been in the position where someone has allegedly racially abused me, and I can't imagine how I would react to it, but I'm sure I wouldn't take it very, very well. So, there'd be mitigation, of course, if he was to react, but as I say, he didn't at the time. I thought he handled himself really well, and I would say, well, look, if we can't put our trust in him after that, then when can we? So yeah, for me, leave the ball in his court. If he gets sent off, he gets sent off. It's his own silly fault. But I'd like to think that the response from him isn't going to be anger and trying to leave one on him or scrap with him. I think the response from Hannibal is going to be, I want to play you off the park. I want to knock you out of the cup. I want to score a goal in front of 5,500 travelling Burnley fans. And wouldn't that be the best way to respond if he did?
Yeah, I agree. George, it's quite an interesting game, isn't it? Because, as I said at the outset of this particular section, I think Burnley have got the capability to do both this season. I don't think they need to sacrifice a cup run for promotion. I think they've got the squad depth and they've got a mindset of a manager who should be able to do both. And a manager who's got a lot of respect for integrity of all competitions as well. Preston are a very different kettle of fish here. Their season from a league perspective is over. They're not going down. They're not going to get into the playoffs. This is the last thing that they've got this season to keep their hopes of a big end to the season alive. I'm expecting a full strength side and a really difficult game here. Do you think that that's fair to expect that from Preston? And can we cope with that?
Maybe a full strength side, but it doesn't look like a full strength home sport, does it? They can't even sell it out, which I think is a bit tin pot. It's their biggest game in years, dare I say, and they can't even sell it out. But from our perspective, I think we're buzzing for it, aren't we? We give Preston stick because they were proper. They were wrong uns back in the day. Oh, we are superior. You're not, are you? But it's a fantastic away day. So I just wanted to say that it's brilliant. You go there, you get the full stand. It's a fantastic atmosphere. So I think it'll be a really good day on Saturday. And to answer your question, I think we'll go with a sort of half strength side. And of course, that's good enough to beat Preston if we all play to our capabilities. I think, there's certain changes which are obvious. I think Hladky in for Trafford is obvious. These goalkeepers, bless him, he's going to get to play maybe 6 or 7 games in the season. Like, give him the game. He's an experienced Championship goalkeeper. Get him in. I think it's maybe an opportunity, as we were discussing in our group chat today, to test someone out at left back.
Yes.
With Humphries being out, I think let's try Oliver Son there. Let's see how he goes. Because for me and for a lot of us, I think Perez is unfortunately the sort of weak link. So without Humphries, I dare say I'd prefer another option at left back. I think when you go forward to midfield, I'd really love if, depending on Hannibal's situation or whether there's a slot next to him, I'd really love to see John Josh Shelvey get a run out from the start. I think when he came on against Sheffield Wednesday, he just looked a cut above. Now he strolls around, he struts around because maybe he's not got the legs he used to have. But he just, you know what? And as soon as he gets the ball, it changes the entire dynamic of the game because the opposition has to take that 5-10 yard step back because they know he's got it in his wheelhouse to just ping balls here, there, and everywhere. They're on the back foot immediately as it comes to his feet. So I'd love to see him get a goal from the start. I think he's really impressed since being sort of bled into the squad. Elsewhere, it'd be nice if Benson could hopefully get 70, 80 minutes under his belt from the start. But otherwise, we've got options, now with Fleming and Foster sort of to and fro in between that forward slot. It's a chance for either of them to start up front and to, hopefully bag a winning goal. But I think we've got a great chance here, and I think we should do the business with a sort of half and half strength side.
Good. Tom, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what George has said there. I'd like to see Sonner at left back. I think it'd be interesting to see what Shelby's like starting in a sort of quasi-championship game. The big one for me is Foster up front through the middle and getting a chance to shine there. I think you're right, George. I think Fleming is starting to. He had a bit of a purple patch, didn't he, just after Christmas? But he's starting to look a bit less effective there. And obviously Foster was dropped against Wednesday for Edwards, and rightly so, because Edwards is obviously a much better winger than Foster. But we'd like to think that we could keep him happy and ticking over as a good option, either from the bench or to start. And I think if he had a good game and kind of exercised the demons of 2 weeks ago when he missed those 2 chances at Deepdale, that might go a bit of a way to restoring his confidence. So yeah, Foster at centre forward for me is a big one, and maybe it would even be interesting to see what Fleming's like playing in his actual position for a change and sticking him.
No, don't be silly. Let's not bring common sense into this. It's good. I think on the assumption, Tom, that we do beat Preston, we are still getting to the business end of the FA Cup, and it's going to be very, very difficult to avoid, if at all, a Premier League side. There's not many easy games left once we get to the next round. Who would you like to see, presuming that who's expected to get through? What kind of fixture do you want for the next round?
I think a home draw, first and foremost, would be nice after getting about 8 or 9 on the trot away. I suppose the best option would be, and I don't mean to disparage these clubs, someone like Bournemouth or Fulham or Crystal Palace at home. They're certainly all going really well in the league. I think that's, you look at the list of teams and you see how Spurs aren't there, Liverpool aren't there. You think, it's an easier draw than it has been. But when you look at how good those clubs have been this season, I don't think there are many easy draws. But you'd like to think with a fair wind at home to the likes of Crystal Palace, they would be beatable. It's similar to what Preston are we thinking about us. Yeah. They're obviously a better side, but if we catch them on a day at home, they are beatable. And obviously, how brilliant would it be to get to a Wembley semi-final? It's been 73.
Yeah, we're literally. Yeah. It's been a while, but beat Preston in 90 minutes. It's incredible. I think George, if we do, whoever we do draw in a quarterfinal, assuming we get there, we want them to still have something to play for, because we don't want them to have their eye on the ball. Like you say, it would be great to get one of the Premier League sides that's really pushing for a European spot or even a Champions League spot. While they're a very good side, they will play a second string side, because they won't, they've got way more important things to do. The Premier League this season, for example, is a bit of an anomaly in that all of the big powerful clubs are all doing absolutely terrible. It's a bit like the Leicester season, albeit, we're not going to get an unusual winner, but there's going to be teams fighting the Champions League that shouldn't be there. So I think that for me would feel like a nice home draw against a Premier League side that's got all of their eggs in a different basket.
Yeah, it'd be a no-lose situation, I think. If we get through on Saturday, we're in an FA Cup quarter-final. Ideally we get the easiest draw possible. Maybe, like you say, someone in a false sense of security, eyes elsewhere. But whatever happens, we're in the quarter-final. It's our cup final, to brandish that term, to get to Wembley. If we do it, fantastic. If we don't, we can concentrate on the league and almost use that as the final sort of bit of a kick up the backsides to go all the way, like we did when we just missed out on Wembley thanks to Roman Pavlyuchenko, and I'm apologies for swearing on the podcast there.
Let's not go down. Let's get it automatic instead. Let's not use this as a way to get to Wembley. I don't want a playoff final this year, thanks. Let's get second. George, quick score prediction, please, while we wrap this up.
2-0, I think. I'd love to see Foster on the score sheet. I think it would do him and the team a world of good if we can get him back scoring, because he's doing okay on the other side of things, and the rest of his game, he just needs to get that goal, doesn't he? He needs that confidence.
Yeah. Tom?
I'm not a big Hladký fan, so I'm going to blaspheme and predict us to concede a goal. Perhaps 2-1 after extra time, something like that. But I agree with George. As much as Preston will play their best team and will play probably a mixed team, we are much better than them, and we have been for a while. And let's enjoy that as long as it lasts.
Indeed. I'm going to go for an absolute riot. I'm going to go Burnley 4, Preston 0. I think we're going to keep another clean sheet, and I'm going to think it's going to be a riot for the Clarets. So there we go. Listeners, you know the drill by now. Drop us a comment in the comment section what you think your score prediction will be. Will we finally concede a goal? Will this be the game that concedes it? Who knows? Those of you who are listening to this on our podcast channel, you can drop us a line at social media and give us a score prediction, please. And all of you, no matter how you are listening to this week's episode, please stop what you are doing, hit subscribe, click on notifications, and you'll never miss an episode of your favourite Burnley podcast. That's all we've got time for this week. We should be back next week to give you the reaction to that FA Cup game. Will we be in the quarterfinals? Who knows? We'll also be looking ahead to the Cardiff game and the Luton games, which is a busy week for the Clarets back in the league next week. I think Cardiff away and then Luton at home, 2 absolute monster games. So do keep an eye on social media. We will let you know when those episodes are live. My thanks as ever go to everybody who has contributed to making this episode, particularly my colleagues George and Tom, who are for joining me this evening. And special thanks to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time. The No Nay Never podcast is brought to you in association with the talkSPORT Fan Network. Our host and editor is Natalie Bromley, and the show is produced by Matt Moss. Our resident statistician is Dave Roberts, and our FPL expert is Adam Dennett. The Analysis Show team is collectively Tom Whittaker, Rich Steele, George Poole, Charlotte Rigby and Adam Dennett. Our music is provided by George Gaskell, and our newsletter team is headed up by Jamie Smith. If you don't already, you can subscribe to our newsletter by visiting nonaynever.substack.com. Thanks as ever go to our partners talkSPORT. We are proud to be associated with the talkSPORT Fan Network.